In this video, I will provide you with another way you can save a few dollars when building a house and using tongue and groove or shiplap instead of plywood or OSB for the overhang. And in this example here, we have 1x8, but you can see that we have a small strip here. And this is only going to be if you have to break the sheathing over a block and have a specific length for the roof overhang. Some building codes might not require that. And if that's the case, you won't have to notch around the sheathing here. You can run a full piece here. And another thing I want to point out, even though this isn't something that's going to save you a few dollars, but will provide you with a nicer view from the bottom. And that will be anytime you change directions like we did here with our tongue and groove sheathing. So this might not look that horrible. However, all you need to do to fix it will be to break the sheathing over a block or over one of your lookouts like we did here. So all we did was made this a little shorter and these a little longer to solve that problem. Another thing you could do will be to run the boards in the same direction. However, something like this usually requires a little more work. And as a track home builder, I rarely saw that. This was not going to be common. However, I have seen it done that way plenty of times. And now for the suggested tip in the video. All I'm going to suggest is that you use the sheathing measurements to calculate the length of your overhang instead of using what the architect might have on the plans. For example, the architect might call out for an 18-inch, a 24-inch, or a 30-inch roof overhang. And I get it, if that needs to be that, you can still ask the architect if you can mix and match some of the lumber until you get close enough to save a few dollars. And I'll provide you with some examples of that here in a few seconds. But first, I want to show you what I'm talking about. If I reduce the length of the overhang just a little bit, I can get rid of the small strip and avoid wasting additional lumber. Now, if you do cut this, make sure that you're aware of this problem right here. And this problem could be solved by simply moving this board down a little bit. Or it can be solved by leaving the tongue and groove alone on this section of the sheathing. So in other words, you would rip this last board down, get rid of the tongue or get rid of the groove until you get to this point here, and then leave the groove or the tongue, whatever side you're going to be using, to make this section work here. Next up, let's go ahead and take a look at what I mentioned earlier. Instead of using the same sized boards, you can mix and match some of these boards to arrive at a variety of different lengths, and you can even cut one board in half. Here I took one of the 1x8s and cut it in half so that I could have a square edge on both sides. And something like this might depend upon lumber available in your area, because if you don't have any 1x6 or 1x8 or 1x4 shiplap or tongue and groove, then you're not going to be able to create this overhang. And of course, you will have to deal with that accordingly. So here we have a 1x4 and a 1x4 at the end, 1x8, 1x6. And on our next one, we have a 1x6, 1x8, 1x4, 1x8. So again, we're just simply mixing and matching until we can get at a better number and something that's not going to produce a lot of waste. And these are things I rarely come across. Even this one here, I rarely come across something as simple as this, where you can simply rip one of the boards in half and place one at one end and the other at the other end to create square sides that are going to be easier to nail, provide us with a little more structural strength, and it might not split as easy when we're nailing the sheathing to our blocks. And next up, let's take a look at a few different ideas on ways you can save money by reducing the size of your fascia board. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first example here, where we have a standard roof rafter, a 2x6 with a 2x8 piece of fascia board. And this method, of course, without a doubt, is the most common method used by builders. You're simply going to use fascia board that is a little bit larger than the roof rafter. 2x6, 2x8. You have a 2x4, maybe you're going to have a 2x6. Or you could have a 2x6 roof rafter and a 2x6 piece of fascia board. However, this usually isn't that common. And the reason for that is some fascia board is actually a little smaller than the roof rafters. For example, if I have a 2x6 that is 5.5 inches wide, I might have a piece of 2x6 fascia board that is 5.25 inches wide. And if that was the case, I would either need to lower the fascia board to where it was even at the bottom and then create a problem with the roof sheathing, or raise the fascia board to where it's even with the top of the roof rafter and then have a 1/4 inch gap between the edge of the fascia board and the roof rafter. That usually doesn't look very good. And of course, if I want to use a 2x4, I can simply shape the bottom of the roof rafter. And that can be done a variety of different ways. And this would be one of them, simply going from this point here to this point here, or a 3.5 inch measurement this way, and then going to the bottom of the roof rafter seat cut. And you can get as creative as you want to. The only thing I don't recommend doing is making this smaller than 3.5 inches. And of course, we can rip the tails. This is another common method. I've used this one a lot. Even if you have 2x6 roof rafters, you rip the tails down to 3.5 inches or even 4.5 inches. Or I hate to say it, even 5 inches if your fascia board is going to be wider than 5 inches. 5.25, 5.5 inches. Then everything should be fine if this is a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch, or even an inch smaller than the fascia board. And of course, this is a little old school, going back to a 1x4. Instead of having a 2x4, you can have a 1x4. Instead of a 2x6, you can use a 1x6. And again, if you're looking to save money, then this could be exactly what you're looking for. And if the rafters are a little wider, you can always put a little design on the end of the rafter tails. And of course, this design here would create a stronger roof overhang than it would if you ripped this down to 3.5 inches here. However, this wouldn't be something that's going to save a home builder money, because this could be labor intensive here. And if that's the case, something like this might work a little better. Again, going from the bottom of the seat cut to the edge of what would be the fascia board measurement. And again, this could always be a little smaller. If you have 3.5 inch 1x4, you can always have this line come up to maybe 3.25 inches if that's going to work for you. And my last example would be to use a 1x4 and then create a level line across the bottom of the roof rafter. Something like this could be used for a flat soffit. Just make sure that you leave enough room here if you're going to put some type of plywood or siding covering the soffit. And to make this work and keep your 3.5 inches at the very end of the rafter tail, you might need to install a larger piece of fascia board, maybe a 1x6 or something 4.5 inches wide. And the last thing I want to mention is something I used on a variety of different projects. This might work for you, might not. And that would be to rip a 2x6 in half or a 2x8 in half. 2x6 would give you 2.75 inch wide fascia board, and a 2x8 might provide you with up to 3.75 inches in width for your fascia board. And don't rule out that a 2x10, 2x12, or 2x14 might provide you with a perfect size lumber for your fascia board. However, make sure that you do the math here and make sure that you're actually saving some money, because it's going to cost you a few dollars to rip that lumber in half or even rip it into thirds, whatever's going to work better for your project. And thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, let us know by hitting the thumbs up button or letting us know in the comment area.